Hello, this is Tutorial Island. Today I'm going to show you how CSS3 selectors works. As you see, we have simple HTML file here, which I'm going to explain in a moment. As you see, we including style sheet style.css, in which we actually going to write down our code. And we also have a couple unordered lists. First one holds some string values in its elements, and another unordered list in it. We also have another unordered list which holds some links which actually points to our paragraphs below. So I'm going to show you some interesting selectors here. We also have a couple paragraphs which are wrapped in our container div block, which has class wrapper. We also have another block which holds only one paragraph in it. As well, we have form which holds couple input fields. In this case, we have text input, password input, another text input, number input, which is new for HTML5, and email input as well. We also have a range set for our number input, so we can set from 1 to 10 or whatever numbers you want in this case. And we have set value, which is in our range of these min and max values. We also have a couple checkboxes. First one is regular checkbox. Second one is checked already on load. Third one is disabled, so that means it's not active at all. And fourth one is read only, so that means it's read only. You cannot change the state, but during form submit it would send the value for check B4. We also have a set button here, and we have block elements with text in the between, and we have completely empty div element as well. So I think we can start with our actual coding here. So as you see, we have relatively small font size here, so I'm going to increase that with our CSS2 selector, which we learned in the last lesson. So I'm going to change font size to something like 22 pt. That's supposed to be more readable for you guys. So first selector which we're going to learn with will be every element preceded by another element. In this case, we're going to write down something for paragraph element, which is preceded after HR. So in this case, if we write down HR tilde sign and we write down something like P, that would mean that if there was HR, every single element in that block followed by P would be affected. So if I change background color to gray, that's going to affect our paragraph Lithuanian. So it's going to affect every single paragraph in the same level of DOM element, and in this case it's only Lithuanian. So if I'm going to reload the page, you see Lithuanian language was affected. If I move, let's say, Norwegian paragraph from here, or maybe I just move this one above, that would mean every single paragraph element after this element will be affected. In this case, that would be Norwegian and Lithuanian. So if I reload the page again, you see that these two are affected as well. So if that would be more above, that would affect all three paragraphs and so on. Okay, so our next selector would be starts with. In this case, we're going to select our email address. Oh, I put a mistake here, so let's fix that. Remove this. So we're going to select value which starts with example. In this case, we're going to write down code very similar from the last tutorial. We write down the value, which is our attribute name. We're going to do the sign. We're going to do equals, and we write out example. So that means we're going to select each value which starts with example, value attribute which starts with example, and we're going to change color to blue. So if I reload this page, we're actually seeing that this was affected because it starts with example. So in this case, if I change value to sum, it would actually check first two text inputs. This is password. So In CSS3, we as well can select it by how it ends. So in this case, if I write down very similar code, I just do value, a dollar sign equals to, let's say, com. That would select every value which ends with com. So in this case, we're going to change color to orange. And we know that we have only one field which ends with com, and that's our email. I didn't save this file, so we're still seeing double.com. Okay, so that's affecting that because this is ending with com, and blue is because it's starting with some. That's pretty nice trick, I guess. Another way of selecting would be by selecting by substring. In this case, we're going to write down, again, almost the same code. We're going to write down value, and instead of writing down first or second symbols, we're going to write down star symbol and equal to our substring. In this case, let's select by who contains, let's say, letter M. So if I write down here M, and I would like to change, let's say, background color to yellow, and we refresh this one, that's affected these three fields because all of them contained letter M. So in this case, if I want to be a bit more specific, I could do MP for this one. So that's going to affect only email field, as you see. So that's pretty interesting selectors, and that's basically colors up most possible attribute selections here. So next, I assume we should select our form elements. So in this case, we're going to start off with checkboxes. And to do so, we're going to start with checked, which means that we're selecting every checked element in our DOM element, input checked element, to be more specific. So in this case, we're going to change width to 20 pixels, and we're going to change height to 20 pixels as well. So if I reload the page, we're actually seeing the checked element is slightly bigger than other ones. So if I select and check first one, that's actually changing that as well and changing it back on the go, which is a nice thing. We also can select disabled elements. So in this case, if I write down, again, very similar code, like this, and I would like to change it something to 25 pixels width and 25 pixels height. So on reload, we will see that this one is slightly bigger than our checked elements as well. Oh, I see. I made checkbox read only. Actually, that's not valid. We should make it for our, let's say, first text type input or password or whatever. So in this case, we're going to select our read only element. So in this case, if I write down input read only, and I'm going to change background color to, let's say, gray. That means we can only read that field. So on reload, we're actually seeing that I cannot type anything here, and I cannot do anything besides selecting it, copying it, and basically that's it. By selecting that field, right? This one is actually still valid because first of all I removed the thing, but if I would keep it here and reload the page, it still would be active because it's not text like input field. Another thing which we could do would be very similar but opposite for this one. So we can select input, read, write, which means it's going to select opposite to the first one. So let's change color to, let's say, cyan. And if I reload that, we're seeing that it's changed every element's color, which is read and write. So not only read only, but you can actually interact with that. This is, by the way, a number. You can change the number and it goes up to our range and below to our min value, which is interesting. These are not affected by class because to make styled classes we should use the labels, which I'm going to cover up in some other tutorials. Another selection could be required. So in this case, if I write down input required, that would select every field which is required by our form. In this case, I have password as required, and we're going to change, let's say, border to 1 pixel solid red. That means that this field is required to fill up. So if I reload, that's actually changing only that field because it's only field which is actually required to fill up. So I could not submit our form before I fill up this one, which is nice feature to use, but I would not rely on that, and I would still use JavaScript for some checkings, especially for like email and other things. I guess I'll show you how this works a bit later on. Okay, so first I'm going to show you how optional works, and after that I'm going to show you how HTML5 input fields works here. So also we have input optional, which selects obviously every single optional field. So in this case, if I change a color to a border color to, let's say, I don't know, blue, that would change every element but not require it to blue. So in this case, this is still for required, and every single other element is optional. We also can select in range and valid and invalid values. So for this, I should explain how email number works here. So in this case, we have number which has minimum and maximum range values, and we have actual value of 7. So if I reload the page, actually 7, and I can reduce that to 1 or increase that up to 10. So this is in range value. So if I would like, I could select something like input in range. That would select inputs which are in range, and I would like to change, let's say, color to green. And if I reload, we actually seeing that this is green because it's in range that's between 1 and 10. But if I change the value, press it up to, let's say, 11, which is out of range, and that means it's invalid value as well. So if I reload that, it's actually become black because it's out of range. So this is ignore it. So we could actually even select something like input and invalid. Let's make it red. It's actually selecting because it's out of range. Yeah. So it's making it red because it's invalid value. It's not something we meant in the first case here. So it's making it red. Also, we have like email. So in this case, we have email which is valid. But if I do something like dot, that's invalid email, so it becomes red immediately. So if I write down some numbers, that's invalid email as well. But you should not rely on this one, because if you write down something like this and type add some numbers, it assumes that's valid email address, because email address can be like IP address is something similar to that. So we basically have IP address and IP address to define our hosts. but nobody's using that. So this is a bit tricky because you can enter some random stuff with in it, and it will assume that you actually write down the email there. So I would not rely on this checking here. I would use JavaScript checking, and after that post-processing with back-end language. We also can select valid elements. So in this case, instead of this one, we could do just valid, and that would select all valid elements. So if I reload, it's going to make it green if it's valid, or we can do light green, yellow. Let's make it better, light gray. Okay, that's not working out for me. Okay, let's make it just green. So it's very clear how it works. So we can select it like that. I forgot to mention we also have out of range. In this case, if I just select this one and let's write out of range, it's going to be, let's say, purple. So if I reload the page, it's going to change. Oh, red is overwriting that. So if I put it to the back, it's going to change to purple because it's out of range, because it's supposed to be between 1 and 10. Okay, so next selector which I would like to cover up would be empty. So in this case, if we check our code, we see that we have empty element which I defined before. So if I write down something like here, if I write down something like div, which is empty, and I like this class something like width 200 pixels and height 200 pixels, background color red, that would actually be applied to our last element, which was completely empty. So if I change our code in our list element, something like this, and I keep it empty, that actually is supposed to work for that. Display block. So it displayed as block. Because we have div here. So if I write down lim, that would actually work out here, and that's how it looks. So if I do in general empty, that selects every empty element. In this case, it's actually selecting most of, or like pretty much every single element of the form. Because in some cases, you could see somewhere in the code that people writing down input field like that, and they closing it like this. This is used in, I believe, in XHTML or something. So this is some habit of some people, and that's counted as empty element because it has no text node in it, and that's why it's selected. So you should be careful with this one. And next selector, which we're going to first, I would like to be more specific with this one, so we don't have all this weird stuff happening. And I would like to select something. Oh, by the way, I would like to mention as well, we can write down this, we can do comma and write down something like this. So we could actually select two different things and apply the same things for two separate elements, well, selections in our case, on our document. Another thing which I would like to cover up would be first of type. In this case, let's write down P. So we're going to select first paragraph type. So first of type. And we're going to change background color to orange. So if I reload, that's actually going to change a couple of elements here. And that is because it's changing not first paragraph on the document, but first paragraph on its parent. So in this case, it's selecting every single P in our document. It's after that it goes to the parent. In this case, our parent is wrapper, and it's selecting only first paragraph. So English, and in this case Russian, because P, its parent is div, and first P is Russian. So if I reload, we're seeing it's English and Russian. So that's how first of type works. We also could select something like last child. In this case, we can write down P, last child, and we're going to change background color to pink. If I reload this page, we're seeing that these two was affected. That's also working in the same manner. So it's selecting all P elements, it's going to its parents, and it's selecting last children, in this case P, and that's Lithuanian, and in this wrapper it's Russian again. So it's changing Lithuanian and Russian to pink. If you're going to check it here, it's exactly what's happening on our document. So again, it's selecting P last child. So in this case, P is such a child, and it's child for our div element with class wrapper. So its last children is Lithuanian, and in this wrapper is Russian. So that's how it's selected by last child. Another thing to select way of selecting things would be P last of type, and we can actually change again, let's say color to red. So if I reload the page, we're actually seeing exactly the same results. We also can select only of type. So in this case, we can write down something like P only of type, and we're going to change background color to yellow. And if I reload, you see that only Russian was colored, affected. In this case, that is because we're selecting only P of type. In that case, it's again selecting every single element, and it's checking for P is only children of its parent. In this case, P, which was Russian, was only child of wrapper, paragraph child, in this part of the document, and it was affected by our style. There is also a very similar selection like P only child. This is less specific, but it would do the same thing. So if I change background color to orange and reload the thing here, it would change that one to orange. This one is affected from other code. So if I change it to be a bit more specific to green, it would be applied only to this one. So that's how it actually works with these selections. I'd like to mention that you actually can put an attribute here, so number, and that would be a selection from where exactly. So you just play around with these things and you will see how it's actually working out, and just try to make up some weird documents like this one, and just try to select things because it's the best way to learn is practice. So just try something out. If you have any questions, obviously you can write down comments below and I will try to answer them. Okay, so there is 4 more selectors which I'm going to cover up. First one would be root, which is selecting our root document in HTML. That's HTML tag. So this is this. So if we going to write down something like a root, we actually selecting that one, but I don't believe it's very like widely used. So if we change background color to, let's say, I don't know, light gray, that would change our document color because it's our root thing. I believe that would be used in some applications for styling, which is not web applications. For example, in some Linux environments, you can write down CSS code to actually style up the applications. So I believe this one would make your application main style code for your application root, like main block. So it's good to know, but most probably for websites you're not going to use that. Okay, another selector which I would like to cover up would be not selector. So if I write down something like, I don't know, not div element, which is not with class wrapper. So in this case, if I write down not wrapper, and I would do something like border 2 pixels dashed blue, and I reload this page, it's selecting elements like div elements which does not have class wrapper in it. So in this case, I skipped these and I select another one. So if I do something like empty, that's going to skip our element, which is in the very bottom here, and will apply the same code for block elements and will apply for wrappers. So our paragraphs would be wrapped in that. As you see, that's exactly what's happening here. It skipped this one, but it applied the same code for other ones. And the last one is selection selector. So in this case, if you select something, usually it's blue color. It depends on operating system, but usually it's blue color, and you can actually change that. So if you want, you can write down that, for example, each div element with double comma is selection color would be, for example, yellow. So if I reload the page here and I try to select this one, it's actually selecting it as yellow. And I can do background color, for example, blue. So if I reload, it's actually how it's doing. It's blue and yellow. So I can do that for different type of elements. For example, I did that for this one. I could make something like P for paragraph and do the same selection code. Just I could change background color to red and regular color to black, let's say. So if I reload that, if I select this one, it's changing to blue and yellow, and this one is changing to red and black, which is a very nice trick. You actually could even make something more interesting with adding something like a span element, which is in line element. So if I write down something, if I write down something like that, you're not going to see effect in the document here. It's exactly the same, even if I added this one. But I could actually do something like span and selection and change style for selecting it. For example, in this case, I would like to do something like, let's say, background color blue and actual color red. So if I reload the page now, upon selection it does that, but if I select that span element, it's actually changing the color of our selection, which is very nice if you want to emphasize something. So I think I covered every single element for CSS3 selectors. And if you have any questions, please comment. If you didn't subscribe yet, please subscribe. That helps a lot. So thank you for watching and wait for next tutorial.